Okay, hello everyone. It's 1 minute past 2 p.m. where I am, at least, in Oslo, Norway, Central European time. I just thought I'd get started with a bit of housekeeping so that you know how this works. So this is a Funka webinar, and our webinars are always recorded. And we usually put them on our YouTube channel afterwards so that you can access the webinar and the discussions after at a later point. During the webinar, please do ask questions, but if you do ask a question, we ask you to use the Q&A function, which you can find in the little ribbon that's probably at the bottom of your screen or at the top or wherever it is. There's a Q&A button, so please put your questions there and then we'll see them and we'll be able to get to them during the webinar. And the reason for this is that your camera and microphone have been disabled. This is to ensure that the webinar runs more smoothly for everyone. If you would prefer to ask your question verbally, orally, please use the raise hand function and we can turn on your microphone and camera so that you can ask your question. And the raise hand function you can find in the ribbon as well. There. This webinar is live captioned, and we have a fantastic live captioner named Rochelle with us today. So she'll be captioning the webinar. Obviously, the webinar is in English, and the captions will be in English. If you want to access the captions, please hit the CC button in the ribbon. You can also get automatic translations of these captions if you would like to have that. We have automatic translations into Swedish, French, and Spanish today. So please see the chat for details about how to access these translations. And that's the housekeeping. So let me see here. So, right. So my name is Emil, and I'm a researcher here at Funka. Today I'm joined by Pilar Herrero from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And we will also be joined by Thomas Logan, I hope, but he hasn't joined yet, but I hope he will be with us shortly. So Pilar, would you mind just introducing yourself quickly and telling us a bit about who you are?
Yes, first of all, I would like to audio describe myself. Yes, I am a 63-year-old woman with short gray hair. I'm wearing some plastic glasses, round glasses, and headphones, and I am sitting in my study, and it's like a bookcase at the back, and I'm sitting on an armchair. So I am Pilar. I work at Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and my work for the last 20 years has been on media accessibility. And I work a lot also in the standardization as well. So that's what I do.
Yeah. Thank you, Pilar. And as I said, I hope we'll be joined in a minute by Thomas Logan as well, who's with an organization called Equal Entry. So let's see if he joins. So the way this will work today is that I'll start by giving a brief presentation. Hopefully won't take more than 20-25 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a bit of a panel discussion. And I've prepared a few headings for us to discuss. But please also submit your own questions that you would like us to answer regarding the topic at hand, which is new realities, unlocking the potential of extended reality for persons with disabilities. And so this is obviously the name of our new report, which has been released now. I just wanted to give you a run through of that report and its findings and really sort of what it contains. So as I said, my name's Emil, and I'm a researcher at Funka. Here you see a lovely portrait image of me, a man in a white shirt looking intently at the camera. And I just wanted to give you a brief run through of Funka. Most of you will probably be familiar with Funka and who we are, but there's always someone who's new to us and the wonderful world of Funka. So here's a quick primer about us. So Funka was founded by the disability rights movement in the 1990s. We became a privately owned company in the year 2000. Our headquarters are in Stockholm, Sweden, but we have clients all over the world. We're also a founding member of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, or IAAP. And IAAP, for those of you who don't know that organization, is a global organization for accessibility professionals, which works to define, promote, and improve the accessibility profession. And IAAP also offers networking, training, and certification for accessibility skills. Funka, for its part, is an accessibility one-stop shop. And that means that we offer a lot of different services, including accessibility training, accessibility audits, document remediation, that is looking at PDFs and EPUBs and other types of documents to make sure that they're accessible, support and recommendations, studies and investigations, of which this is an example, and research and innovation. Right, so enough about us. So on to today's actual topic, which is extended reality, or XR. Again, many of you probably have a good idea already of what extended reality is, but to make sure that we're all on the same page, here's what we mean by the term. So extended reality refers to immersive digital environments. This includes things like virtual reality, VR, augmented reality, AR, and mixed reality, MR. And the difference here is that whereas virtual reality is a sort of completely immersive experience, completely totalizing, where it sort of encapsulates you in a completely digitally generated environment, augmented reality and mixed reality so acts to enhance the real world environment around you. And sort of acts in sort of interplay with the real world environment. So, extended reality is the general subject area for this report. And here to the right, you can see a man wearing a virtual reality headset, a head-mounted device for virtual reality. Why did we decide to look at this? Well, part of it is that we've seen a rapid development of extended reality technologies over the past 10 years or so, where this was once a very niche technology. It's now firmly in the mainstream, and it's used not only in gaming and entertainment, but also for things like skills training and manufacturing and defense and a whole range of other things. So it's out there and it's very much in the mainstream. However, because of what we do, we here at Funka know that technological developments like that can affect you differently if you're a person with disabilities. Sometimes the needs of persons with disabilities haven't been considered at all when it comes to new technologies, leading to barriers to using those technologies. Then again, new technologies can also create significant benefits for persons with disabilities. such as more independence, more inclusion in society, and more opportunities for employment and other things. So we decided to find out sort of what was what in terms of XR technologies, what barriers are there, what benefits are there, and just try to get a sense of the state of play that we're working with here in terms of XR and persons with disabilities. Here I want to mention that this work was made possible by Meta, which is an organization that you may know better by its former name, Facebook. So I'm very excited about this, and obviously our research will contribute to Meta's new strategic push into the virtual reality space. So that's quite exciting for us that we get to be a part of that. Just very briefly, the methods that we used to do our research. We did desk research, so looked at the available literature and other sources that are out there that were, and things that people have written and said about this topic previously. We then did a survey with stakeholders all over the world. And following that survey, we did interviews with a range of different experts. And that then resulted in the report that you can now access on the Funka website. Right, so what did we find out then? Let's talk about the results of our research. And let's start by talking about extended reality and accessibility. How accessible is extended reality technology today? From our review of the available literature, as well as from our conversations with users, we know that there are a couple of recurring barriers that persons with disabilities encounter when using mainstream extended reality technologies. Here are just a few examples of what people might mention. Some users find that mainstream extended reality devices and solutions are incompatible with their assistive technologies. You may, for instance, find yourself unable to use a screen reader in combination with a head-mounted VR device. Extended reality environments don't always provide for alternative formats, such as captions or sign language for those users who need them. So that's another barrier that some people experience when it comes to XR. Users with disabilities, and in particular cognitive disabilities, may find extended reality interfaces difficult to understand and operate. May not be used to how these interfaces work. And related to this, to navigate in extended reality environments, you may need to be able to move in a particular way and hit small targets, and you may need to use one particular input modality, which can serve to exclude certain users, especially users with mobility impairments. So these are just some of the barriers. There are other barriers that people mention when it comes to XR and accessibility, but in general, we think that it's clear that today's extended reality solutions aren't always perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust in the way that the web content accessibility guidelines would require. There have been attempts to address this through laws, standards, and guidelines, of course, both through existing instruments. Here we have things like the EN 301-519 standard, which is a European standard for accessibility requirements for goods and products and services in Europe. This also happens to be the standard that the Web Accessibility Directive points towards, so the actual requirements that are indicated by the Web Accessibility Directive in the European Union. The EN 301-519 standard in turn points towards the WCAG standard, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And together these two instruments contain some of the main requirements that you need to consider when you develop digital interfaces. And so they hold a certain amount of relevance, or quite a lot of relevance, for developers of XR technologies, even though they're not developed specifically for that field. We also have the fairly new European Accessibility Act, which is an act that sets accessibility requirements for, or extends accessibility requirements to several new spheres of activity, more industries, more actors across Europe. And this is also something that we think will affect the work to make the XR space more accessible to everyone. We also have some new and more specific instruments that are sort of specifically developed for the XR space. So we have the XR accessibility user requirements. These are requirements for based on user needs, actual user needs, so interviews and tests with actual users with various disabilities that have then been turned into requirements for developers of extended reality solutions. And these requirements have been developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. We also have the International Standardization Organization, ISO, and their common access profiles. And these are essentially personas that you can use to better understand user needs that you might encounter when you try to develop accessible XR solutions. So these are fairly useful tools that you can use as a developer to make XR more accessible, even though both of these tools are still very much under development, so they're not finalized yet. Work is still ongoing on them. And then apart from this, we have what I like to refer to as the XR accessibility ecosystem. So this is comprised of a lot of different organizations working in the extended reality field. We have, for instance, at the very top level, an organization called the XR Association, which is essentially the trade association for the XR industry, primarily from North America. They have members elsewhere, and all the major players in the XR space, such as Facebook and Microsoft and Sony and so on and so on. All these actors are involved in this association, which sort of works to advance the industry and the field as a whole and contribute to knowledge sharing. They have a counterpart in Europe known as XR for Europe, and this is an organization that likewise works to develop the field, develop the XR industry, and contribute to knowledge sharing. And so does a lot of the same things that the XR Association does, but in Europe. More specifically relating to accessibility, we have the XR Access Initiative, or sometimes known as just XR Access. And this is a sort of loosely semi-formal organization that works a lot on networking and knowledge sharing on accessibility as it pertains to extended reality. So a lot of good work being done there. Here, I also want to mention the Accessibility VR Meetup, which is organized and run by Thomas. It's an excellent resource for anyone who wants to network and to hear interesting webinars and really just keep up speed with the field as it develops. So I would highly encourage everyone to go and check out the Accessibility VR Meetup. And then finally, the W3C has a community group known as the Inclusive Design for Immersive Web, CG. And this is a group that sort of brings together practitioners and experts from around the world on the topic of immersive web experiences and accessibility. And among other things, they've been involved in the development of the XR accessibility user requirements that I mentioned earlier. Right. So let's talk a bit about how extended reality can be used specifically for persons with disabilities. In other words, how can extended reality technologies actually benefit persons with disabilities? We encountered three main categories of application here. XR as assistive technology, XR as rehabilitation tools, and XR as awareness raising. By assistive technology, we're referring to solutions that help persons with disabilities in their daily lives, such as screen readers or wheelchairs. Here, extended reality technology is being used in a lot of different ways. Here are just a few examples. So for persons with low vision, there are a number of different devices on the market that enhance their remaining vision through magnification or contrast adjustments or similar. The results of this can be fairly impressive, since they allow the wearers to do things like read books or see facial expressions or watch movies or do things that they weren't able to do previously. However, this is still very much an emerging technology, and unit prices for these devices are still quite steep for the individual user. So this is an area where we expect to see a lot of development as we move along. And the image on this slide is of a person wearing one of these devices that provides vision enhancement. This is a head-mounted device with a pair of goggles in front of the eyes. And these goggles then provide some form of enhancement to the wearer. If you are blind, however, such technologies will do little for you. But there's another interesting application worth mentioning here. That's dynamic audio description. And essentially, these are devices that scan your surroundings and describe them to you automatically through an earpiece. The most basic implementation of this that I've seen doing this research is a device called the Orcam, which is a camera with an OCR reader, so an automatic text reader. So it can read text on a page and then translate that text to speech, which is then fed through an earpiece. So you can actually reads physical text in front of you through an earpiece, and it's a fairly small and wearable device. This technology is also fairly experimental still, but it holds a lot of promise for the future. So these are some interesting applications here. For persons with low hearing, there have been similarly experimental attempts to provide auto-generated captions through augmented reality headsets. The technology for auto-generated speech-to-text is fairly mature at this point, depending on the language they're using, although it's not perfect. We're not going to be replacing live captioners at any point soon, at least not us here at Funka. But the technology is there, we know how to do it. The novelty here is putting these captions into an augmented reality interface so that persons who have low hearing, some form of hearing impairment, can, for instance, participate in conversations, because they can then, this device then listens to what is being said and then translates that speech into text that is then displayed to the wearer in front of them through the head-mounted device that they're wearing. This is actually being developed at the moment, and it's sort of a very cool implementation that we've seen. The most science fiction-y assisted technology application of extended reality that I've seen is AR-powered exoskeletons. So exoskeletons are basically robotic prosthetic limbs. But the difficulty has always been, so how do you operate these limbs? How do you allow the wearer to operate these limbs independently and with a high degree of accuracy? They try to do this with sort of EEG impulses, which is a very advanced thing and didn't really work. And so now what researchers are looking into is operating these prosthetic limbs through augmented reality interfaces. So you wear some form of head-mounted device and then use that to operate the exoskeleton. Very high tech. I barely understand it myself, but it's very cool. And I think this is something that we may see more of in coming years. And finally, there have been efforts to build media players that are specifically designed for immersive media content. And in fact, Pilar, you've been involved in one such project called the EMAC project, IMAC, which I highly encourage you all to check out, because that's a very good tool that can be used for people with different needs to access immersive content. The next category is rehabilitation. And by rehabilitation, we're basically referring to solutions that allow persons with disabilities and others to lessen the effects of their conditions. So think basically physical therapy. Here are just a few examples of how extended reality is being used to accomplish this, examples that we've encountered in our research. There are virtual reality exercises that have been developed to treat childhood amblyopia, more commonly known as lazy eye. If left untreated, this common condition can lead to reduced vision in adulthood. The virtual reality exercises have been evaluated clinically, and they have been found to be effective. So this is something that is in use at the moment, and has shown good results, really. Virtual reality is also being used to help persons with cochlear implants, that is implanted hearing aids, to train their spatial awareness. So a lot of people might not realize this. When you get a cochlear implant, there's a fair amount of rehabilitation that goes into that after getting the implant, because to actually ensure that you're able to use it fully. One major issue that a lot of people have had is what's called spatial awareness, that is determining from where a specific sound is coming. And that's an ability that you have to train to build up when you get a cochlear implant. And there are now good VR exercises that can do this. That can help CI users with this. So that's also a very good use case that we've seen. A large group of persons with disabilities is obviously elderly people. Obviously, as you get older, the likelihood that you will develop some form of disability increases. And so there's been a lot of work into how virtual reality and similar technologies can be used to benefit elderly people. For elderly people experiencing cognitive decline, virtual reality has been shown to be a powerful tool for rehabilitation of everyday skills. And there are now a number of different virtual reality exercises for things like cooking and getting money out of cash machines. So really everyday tasks that you might struggle with if you're experiencing dementia or similar conditions. So there are now virtual reality exercises for this, and they've been evaluated as well clinically, and the results so far have been encouraging. So there's a lot of work going on now. Finally, virtual reality is also being used to create simulation exercises for persons with autism spectrum disorders. these exercises basically allow individuals with autism to practice real-world scenarios that they might find challenging. This could include things like social events or office settings, or even interactions with law enforcement, in one example that we've seen and mentioned in the report. And these exercises allow persons with autism to do this training, do this rehabilitation in risk-free environments, and where they can sort of repeat the exercises as many times as they wish. So that's also a good practical use case for extended reality as a form of rehabilitation for persons with disabilities. And then the final category is what we call awareness raising. And this refers to solutions that aren't really aimed at persons with disabilities themselves, but rather at persons without disabilities who are looking to gain a sense of what living with a disability might be like. There are a few different uses for extended reality that we've seen here. We have, for instance, augmented reality that can be used to simulate visual impairments. And this then shows the user how a particular eye condition might manifest for a person, how that might affect your vision. So if you have glaucoma, for instance, you'll be able to if you want to know what having glaucoma is like, you'll be able to see that through this tool. It sort of simulates this. I think this was developed by the Royal National Institute for the Blind in the UK. And so it's a handy little tool to sort of explain the impact of visual impairment on the individual and create a sense of awareness about that. We've also seen virtual reality being used to teach beginners basic phrases in sign language through a sort of gesture matching technology. Basically, you sort of get a sign up on the screen in front of you, and then you have to sort of shape your hand to match that sign on the screen. Still at a very sort of experimental stage, but this is a good way of getting sort of hearing people to learn a bit more sign language, or it could be at least. And finally, virtual reality can also be used to create more understanding of how a neurodiverse person might experience their surroundings. And Funka has actually done a bit of work here. In particular, we've created a set of virtual reality 360 films that demonstrate how a neurodiverse person might experience the workplace. These films were made for the benefit of employers who want to create more inclusive workplaces, and they can be found on Funka's YouTube channel. So I highly recommend that you go check them out. And the image that you see here on the slide is a screen cap from one of those films showing how a neurodiverse person might experience a meeting in an office with sort of different overlays and things like that. Yeah, so this was just a brief overview of some of the use cases and examples that we encountered doing this research. If you want to learn more about any of these applications and more, please do read the report, because there you'll be able to find descriptions and links for everything, and I think it's interesting reading. I hope so, at least. Finally, let's just look ahead briefly and ask ourselves what might be next for extended reality and persons with disabilities. We see a few trends here. Like a lot of other technologies, extended reality devices will probably move towards greater portability, which will no doubt help increase adoption rates. It will also create more social acceptance for using extended reality solutions in everyday settings, which is something that some users struggle with today. We're also likely to see the development of a specific language for extended reality content. So right now, a lot of immersive content is being developed as if it were intended for other media, such as movies, television, or computer games. As happened for those media formats, however, we will probably start seeing the emergence of practices and shorthands that take into account these specific possibilities and limitations of extended reality technologies. And Pilar, I know that you've done some work on this, and you might be able to say a bit more and speak a bit more eloquently about this than I am, but it's an interesting topic to discuss. Finally, it's important to stress that we're only getting started when it comes to extended reality for persons with disabilities, but we're very much looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. And that was my very quick run through of our report, or at least I hope it was quick, that I didn't run over. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all, and then let me see. Right. Okay. So let me see. Okay, so we have, so the, yeah. So there's a question, if you want to access the report, you can go to the Funka website, and you'll be able to find it there. Perhaps Eva, you can post the link in the chat to the page with the report on it.
Yes, I will do it in a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a question about the cochlear implant solution, and that was a project called Virtual Hearing 3D, I think it was called. You can find more information about that in the report, so look at that. Okay, Pilar, are you with us?
Yes, and I did send an email to Thomas.
Yeah,
because I think he's got the time wrong.
Probably.
But anyway, I just sent him an email.
It's one of the hazards of doing these webinars and where people are in different time zones. Thomas, of course, is based in Tokyo, so a quite different time zone from where we are. Yeah, Pilar, listening to this, what do you think of the sort of current applications of extended reality technologies? Where do you see sort of the biggest benefit at the moment in terms of extended reality for persons with disabilities?
I don't know where to start. I think it would be, first of all, there is a massive number of people who live at home and they are house-ridden. And I think to bring a new reality, virtual reality inside their homes, it would be a fantastic development for tasks like working. You would be able to work from home. You would be able to do shopping at home. You would be able to. So to me, it does make a huge change, and it makes sense. Now, if you're asking me for different groups of clinically tagged people, like people with, then it is very difficult. For example, there is a question from Mike Wald. Is VR confusing for people with dementia? Now, the dementia fan is so huge that I can't say yes or no, or in which stage of dementia, or do you know what I mean? It is very difficult to specify exactly for each group or for each condition or for each how it would benefit. I don't know if this way of going is going to be very helpful. I don't know.
Yeah.
We always manage to upset someone. For example, Robert Bandera in the first question there is that cochlear users, people with cochlear implant, Yes, of course. Perhaps you didn't say people, you mentioned people with hard of hearing, and you didn't say specifically people with hard of hearing and cochlear implants, and they feel upset. And I think, first of all, I think we have to make very clear that we don't want to upset anyone or leave anyone out of this conversation. Yeah. Would you agree to that, please?
Yes, I agree.
So if we upset anyone because I or we say something, then first of all, apologies. That is not our intention. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sorry if I slipped up. I didn't see the complaint here, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer is yes. I do see a huge benefit for XR to people with disabilities. And then in all fields, in the field of entertainment, in the field of education, in the field of work, in the field of, health, yes, I do. Are there any applications that are beginning to be applications, as you said, not very well developed or not very much developed, but yet again, the devices are not fully developed either. So I think chicken and egg, what is going to be first there, the device that we use or the content that is, I don't know, that would be an interesting challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering if you could speak a bit about what I mentioned here at the end about the language, the language of immersive content. Because I remember you and we spoke a bit about it a while back.
Yes, that's something that I remember many years ago. We did some research about accessibility in 3D. And I remember at the time, and that's, I say it's many years ago, I remember at the time that the issue was that in 2D, we are quite used to, and end users to understand and read narrative in 2D. Is linear or not that. But when it went to 3D, it was quite interesting because the 3D was really coming to life when it was moments where there was some stomach, I mean, not brain. So you fell down a cliff or you were thrown into, so it was all to do with emotions, to do with your senses going beyond, And then films or content with 3D was very boring, actually, because the 3D effect actually only happened when we were at the top of a skyscraper, or we were, or a shark was coming to eat us. So it was to do with movement. It was never to do with emotions. So it was never to do with how much I love you. And then the 3D became no. So it was never about your eyes popping because, I have no. So that was quite interesting. These 3D movies were very much about how, you're on a ride, not on an emotional trip. That was the language at the time. And 3D never learned to adapt emotional language to 3D experiences. And now we have exactly the same situation with XR. XR, it is at the moment, it will change, of course, but at the moment it's very passive in the sense that you are there and you choose where to look in the 360 and what to consume in 360. So yet, yes, there is the digital storytelling. So you fix into a point of the 360 and that opens the door to another area. That is true. But still, I think it is very static what happens there. You are in 360 and then something else has to happen. And we haven't learned that yet. So what is produced at the moment is very much 2D and 3D, if you know what I mean. It's not fully 3D understood, not fully 3D developed, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. And so this is something that we probably will see quite a lot of development in this area.
But I hope in film schools, and I hope they begin to see Larry Goldberg is in this webinar, and he developed, in fact, he lent me, and for that I'm very grateful, he lent me some of the first movies in 360 in a restaurant and in an aeroplane and things like that. So perhaps, I don't know if we can ask Larry to say something, but Larry, to me, it is a producer of media content, and is one of the pioneers in 360 content. So I don't know if they've developed further this new narrative in 360 or not. Anyway, the question is there for you, Larry, if you're there.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And I'll be very interested to see what happens with that and how that sort of develops going forward. There's a question here that I'd like to answer, which is what kind of improvements were found when helping those with cognitive impairments in their daily tasks with virtual reality? And are there any augmented reality applications in this field? Perhaps that might be more useful. So if I can answer that backwards, there's actually an example of I believe it's a Spanish organization that did a project on this. This project was called Virtual, Virtual, where they developed a lot of different exercises for older people with dementia and similar conditions to practice daily tasks. And what they did first was that they tried to develop exercises in augmented reality, so that you had the real world environment behind you, and then in a digital overlay that you can then use to sort of do the exercise. But what they found was that this was massively confusing to the target audiences. It didn't really work at all, because people had some trouble distinguishing between the real environment and the digital overlay, and it's just a weird clash there. But when they instead developed exercises that were entirely in virtual reality, so a completely immersive environment, that then worked a lot better, and that then actually gave them tangible results to work with, because the target audience were able to sort of understand what was required of them and able to perform the exercises without barriers. So that was a very interesting concrete finding, that. And obviously the improvements that they saw from that was that the target audiences that were involved and did those exercises were then able to do those activities in reality, having done those exercises. Their ability to perform those activities improved significantly from those exercises.
Can I come in on that? Sorry. One thing that we are doing right now in a project funded by the European Commission called Mediaverse, we are using XR, accessible digital storytelling. So this is what I was saying. We are in an environment, and then you put some hotspots, and these hotspots leads you to somewhere else. And we are developing stories with people with cognitive disabilities. And it's fascinating. It is nothing to do with something especially developed for cognitive disabilities. We are just interacting with people with cognitive disabilities to understand if they like co-creation with us. Do they get anything out of doing film co-creation with us? Are they enjoying the experience just simply because it's a new social experience? Are they enjoying telling stories in 360? And it is fascinating. They love it. So sometimes we think that we have to go into developing assisted technologies, which of course are very well, but sometimes by using straight technology off the shelf, it can also be used for other purposes like we're doing now. And it really, really, I don't know if there's the element of surprise, of the element of novelty with them, that they're so fascinating, or because someone from the university goes one morning a week and spends the morning with them and they like that. I don't know, we don't know, but what I can tell you is that the effect is phenomenal. So that is another use of XR for cognitive disabilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what we're getting at as well is that you sometimes you encounter a desire to reinvent the wheel constantly. You sort of want to start building a solution from scratch and making this to try to sort of the be all and end all to all sorts of problems. When in reality, there are solutions out there on the market that you can use and just adapt slightly and then slot that into that. A broader question that I'd like to put to you is sort of regarding augmented reality in general, augmented reality and mixed reality in general. Are we sort of struggling a bit to realize the potential of those technologies?
Yes, we are, but yet again, it is very, very expensive and very difficult to develop anything. Expensive because a HoloLens 2, for example, we just bought one pair and it's about €3,500. So that's one. Two, to generate content for it, it is complex to generate content. And three, if we are going for user-centric, then we've made a mistake again, I think, because I've made a big mistake in the past when we started developing accessibility services in XR 5 years or 6 years ago. The technology was there, but people were not used to the technology. So when we asked them to come in and test the technology and tell us what they would like, they were so amazed at the technology itself that they never thought that you could have subtitles or you could have audio description in it. So the novelty, again, took us away from the actual asking for requirements for accessibility services. So this is an interesting, to me, this is an interesting problem in the sense that nothing about us without us, yes, but when we get people with disability or without disability, because actually it made no difference. The level of readiness of the technology was not popular yet. So when we got people inside a head-mounted display and we asked them, would you like the subtitles better here or there, and to follow you or not follow you? Nobody was ready, neither people with disabilities nor people without disabilities. So then, if now we're going into an augmented reality superposed, I don't even know if we are. Yes, everything should be developed with technology, with accessibility from the very beginning, but I don't know how we do that.
No.
That's a question that I have for you. How do you think we could develop technology for people with disabilities from the beginning if they've never experienced anything in that technology?
It's a good question. Yeah. I think you'd have to sort of completely reimagine your approach to user testing and have that be a much more guided experience, I suppose, and a lot more introduction to the technology in itself, and sort of have to sort of meet halfway.
Yes,
I think that's one way of doing that, I suppose. But I also get the sense that this is something that will sort of improve with time.
Yes, of course, of course it will. You know, but we've always, I think everyone in this webinar, we've always been fighting, or we've always requesting, or even the European Accessibility Act is requesting, is that everything is developed at the start, from the beginning, with accessibility in mind. And this is very well, and this is in fact what we're doing, and that's what we did in the past, but it's really, really challenging. And there is someone asking, can they test what the projects that we're doing, for example, this Mediaverse? Please, I will type my email here. If you write to me, we will be delighted to have anybody to test what we're doing. In fact, that'd be fantastic, and you can help us. So please, yes. There you are.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. And I think what happens with, a lot of technologies that we use today and are sort of second nature to us, they become that way through practice. And I think this is something that we'll see as extended reality. I've said it's in the mainstream, but as it becomes even more mainstream, that becomes more sort of an everyday tool they use. And if Meta gets its way, that might be a reality very soon. Then this is something that will be that more people will get practice in using, and we'll have a completely different be able to have a completely different discussion about it, because we don't have to start from the very beginning with everyone. But rather people will have some familiarity with the technologies going into use testing and things like that. And that sort of increase the pool for possible use testing. It's that way with smartphones and things like that. When smartphones came out, was it 15 years ago, something like that? It's a long time ago now. I think a lot of people, you didn't necessarily know how to use it, because it was a new modality. It was a new way of interacting with the digital interface, and that was sort of new and a bit strange for people. But now it's you don't really bat an eyelid.
Can I tell you something that I still can't cope with? And that's the television remote control. How many years has it been on, this remote control for the television? I don't know. But and years go by and you still, it's my biggest enemy, my TV control. So yes, I see that, the more that it is around, we'll get used to it. But I think we must ask designers to take care on the design and make it easier for everyone, because you can see then the difference between an Apple control for the television and an ordinary one. The Apple is got one button. Mine, I think, it's got like 20 buttons, and I don't even know what half of them do. So yes, yes, we will get used to it, but let's not forget that they should be more clever, and they should also start adding layers of perhaps some intelligence, so they could understand who is there interacting, and they can adapt itself, or some of the work can be done itself. And this is something that Jerry, I think, is asking here. Jerry is blind, so he's absolutely right. The interaction of a blind person with the head-mounted displays is a killer. There isn't any. You can have a little bit of interaction through some voice commands. I don't know did you come up to any solution about how would a blind person interact with a head-mounted display?
No, that's an issue, and as Jerry rightly points out, the sort of social stigma attached to it, it's a barrier for a lot of people. I think, there are, as I said, there are solutions out there on the market, but it's not. I think for a lot of people, it's not really viable to wear that in everyday setting, because it's and also the operating it, and you have to sort of speak out loud to it, and it doesn't really work. And yeah, so that's a puzzle that has to be solved.
Because I think when we talk about XR, I don't know what we're talking about, the accessibility of XR. I don't know if we're talking about accessibility to the content, sort of whatever is there, the media content that we are consuming. Are we talking about the media player? Because the media, the content is played through a media player that has to be accessible. And this media player is in an environment, and the environment also has to be accessible. And the head-mounted display, or whatever, the HoloLens, or whatever we are using, also has to be accessible. So the levels of accessibility, or the barriers, until we reach the content of this media, for XR, is just so many more. So while in 2D, it was quite easy, you either have the phone or you have the television, quite easy. It's not easy, but in XR, the number of barriers, they've just gone worse. Yeah. So that is also something that that we have to take into consideration when we're thinking about the accessibility of XR environments, the interaction to activate the services, to enter into the content.
Yeah, exactly. And Jerry brings up something, a good point here as well, which is that part of the problem is that solutions are developed in quiet and well-controlled laboratories, but these do not transfer well to noisy environments where there are many distractions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's quite a big difference between laboratory environment and a real world setting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Eva, did I see correctly that someone had raised their hand, or is that still?
Yeah, there was Milton, but it's not there yet anymore. So
no. Okay, Milton, sorry, if you still want to ask a question, please raise your hand again. Otherwise,
yeah, there is the question on where to get the XR sound 360. If you go to YouTube, for example, and you put barbershop or 3D, it's fascinating. You would hear the 3D, the ambisonic sound. And that is something that I would like also to comment. When we started doing the research 6 years ago on subtitling and audio description and all that, something that we didn't expect is that what it started to be very useful for us, for the blind. In fact, it was very useful for the deaf. So there was this blur of technologies and end users. What I mean is that we started to design audio description, and then the audio description was for the blind, but it turned out to be quite useful also for the deaf, because the deaf did not manage to see where the action was in the screen or wherever they were looking. So they were looking to a place in the 360, but it was somebody else speaking at the back. So the audio description gave the direction of where was the person who was speaking. So that was very useful. But then the other interesting thing there was that the audio description, it also had directionality. The sound has directionality, and the sound tells us where people are placed or where the action takes place. So again, it was something that it was thought for the blind, but then the deaf was really, really happy about it. And they were, so suddenly we were developing audio description for the blind, but then it was a great help for the deaf. So this is why sometimes this classification of people, and then the elderly are both a bit deaf and a bit blind, like me. So, you know, this classification that we tend to have for groups sometimes is not very useful in XR.
A question here, Clara. would you be able to talk about the very interesting work you've done on captioning in 3D environments? So talk a bit more about that.
The whole thing.
The bullet points.
The bullet points is that we are in 360. So you may be looking in one place, you may be fixating in one place of the 360 ball, if you can think about it being inside a ball. And then there where you are looking is not where the person who is speaking, or the action of the bomb that is exploding is not exactly where you are looking. And if you are deaf and you can't hear anything at all, you need to have an indication of where the origin of the sound is coming from. So then one of the differences between 2D and XR captioning or subtitling is that it must, and here is must, is not a recommendation, it is an obligation. So in when we talk in standardization terms, is that it shall wear an indicator to where the action is taking place, and that could be in a shape of an arrow, or the shape of a radar, or like 100, 300, like a watch. And then you would put the place where the action is taking place, you will mark it. So this is the biggest problem. The biggest problem was that subtitles in XR, they must carry directionality. The other issue is that you should carry them with your head. So if you track your head, or if you track your eyes, for example, in the HoloLens 2, you have an eye tracker built in, so they track where your eyes are looking, and then the subtitles, they will appear automatically in front of you. So that is, again, it's another fantastic development as well. So, and the biggest problem, of course, is that if there are two people talking, then the subtitles collide in front of you. So we have to learn how to make sure that subtitles don't collide in front of you when two people are talking at the same time, or with one is beginning at the same time as the other, or the song, the lyrics of a song are playing at the same time as someone is speaking. You would have two texts on the screen, and this should not collide. And that's something that we've also learned recently.
It's a difficult question.
One more thing that we've learned, colors don't matter. That's very new. That's from 2 weeks ago. We've been testing with end users and subtitles with colors and without colors to identify the speaker. In some European countries, we have colors to identify who is the speaker. In some other countries, the colors, like in France, in some other countries, the colors, they in the subtitles, they identify other features. And so we did put colors with subtitles, and there was no better comprehension with the colors for identification. Did you identify some devices plus apps for some application solutions? For example, lazy eyes. Where can I find this? Yes, Jorge, if you go to Samsung, what is the name of this application? Relumio. If you go to Samsung Relumio, I'll write it down in the chat here. It's fascinating. You put the glasses on, and the glasses will play the opposite of your condition. So if you have glaucoma, or if you have retinitis pigmentosa, or if you have the glasses will compensate for that. This is a Samsung development from Korea, and they've done it, and it is amazing. I've tried it, and it's amazing.
Another question we have here: what would you say using XR for promoting disability sports and participation in physical activity of people living with disabilities? What might that look like? So one application of that that I've seen in the research that we've done is a sort of exercise suite, really. It's a big device where you sort of plug yourself into it, and then you can use it together with a head-mounted device or have a screen in front of you, but it gives you some feedback as you do physical exercises. And the idea is that then this provides motivation to you. And this is sort of a universal design solution, because it doesn't have to be, it's not only for persons with disabilities, it's for everyone really, but it can be used by, and is being used by a person with disabilities for physical rehabilitation and things like that. I think this solution is called Technobody or something like that. So that's sort of one application for it, but more sort of in a practice setting, in a exercise setting. Not sure if it's, I think sort of the connection to promoting disability sports and parasports and things like that is a bit more, is a bit more at a remove at the moment, at least. But who knows? We may see some more developments there. So thank you for that question. Yeah, Flora, you mentioned the HoloLens 2 device, yeah?
Yep.
You've had some experience with that.
Yep.
Question here about what our experience with that in terms of supported apps for people with disabilities. I haven't used a HoloLens myself, actually, but.
Well, the first thing that you noticed, or the first thing that I noticed the moment I put them on, is that they are accessible, in the sense that you can, through voice command, you can activate it. So that is a massive step forward from the previous head-mounted displays. The previous head-mounted displays, they had nothing. I mean, you had to press buttons, and you had to press buttons according to what you saw in the screen. So, I mean, Jerry, forget about ever using any of these. It's really, really sad. The good thing about the HoloLens 2 is that you put them on and they already tell you. You want the same as when you open an Apple Mac. You open it, and when the setting up is that, do you want the instructions or do you want the setup to be through voice? And if you say yes, the whole setup is done through voice. With the HoloLens 2, the whole setup is done through voice, and also the interaction. So when you up, is so fantastic. You press buttons in the air and you do things in the air. You can also activate the commands through voice. And even though I have a bad accent, English accent, they understood me in English. So I was quite pleased about that. Yeah. What someone was asking, let me send you something else. Green sent.
There was a question about where you can find the information about the VR exercises for people with autism and autism spectrum disorders. There are a couple of different examples of that. One organization is called Florio. It's an American organization that works a lot with this. But you can find all the information, the links to that in the report. So I'd recommend that you go check out that, because you can actually find the descriptions and the links to these examples. Yeah.
Someone was asking for the project that we're doing with people with cognitive disabilities is there. And we have, yes, with HoloLens 2. No, we are not developing for HoloLens 2, but what we are developing for the European Commission, it's an XR app, new XR app, to measure the air pollution, and it will be fully accessible. And it would be fully accessible in two ways. One is that the way that you will enter the information, for example, you have to identify yourself. This would be accessible. And the other thing is that the results that it gives you, the machine, they would also be accessible. So because we tend to forget that one thing is to enter information to the machine. That jump has to be accessible. But then when the end user gets the results, that also needs to be accessible. So it's a double trip accessibility. So we are doing that as I speak, and that it would be a fully accessible app for a mobile phone, and it will be released next year. I will put the link as well.
Right. We are sort of nearing the end of our event here, but there was one question that I wanted to answer here, which is, are there any mainstream extended reality projects or products that you can think of that have followed accessibility use requirements? That's the XR accessibility use requirements, and that can be considered to be particularly inclusive. I haven't encountered that. I spoke to the W3C doing this research, and the sense that I got then was that this is still sort of quite new and still very much a work in progress, and hadn't really spread that far. So I think that's sort of where they are with those requirements at the moment. I'm not sure. Have you heard anything else, Pilar?
There are two groups at W3C working with XR. One is the captions, and that's led by Chris Patner from Google. And the other one is the one with Judy Brewer is with the XR in general. Those are the two at ISO. And yes, if you look at the last link that I put there, it's called Green Scent. This is a mainstream project. It's a project to do with the environment. And we are already developing with the XR W3C requirements. We are developing the interaction, the app there. So we are already from the very start developing with that in mind. But that's mainstream. It's nothing. It's not an assistive technology. It's not a project for blind people or for assistive technologies for cochlear implant or for, no. Well, assistive technology for cochlear implant doesn't make any sense. But anyway, no, it's not. There you are. Me, I did it. It's not there. Do you know that someone gave a plenary speaking, talking about people of the dead and the hard of hearing. For 1 hour, the dead and the hard of hearing. That was terrible. Anyway, that was a little joke. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Yeah. Right. So I think it's probably a good place to wrap up here. We've got a lot of good questions and answered them. So yeah, thank you so much, Pilar, for participating in this and giving us your insights on the topic of XR and how it might affect persons with disabilities. Thank you to Rochelle for providing the captions during this event, and thank you to Eva for doing the technology for the event. So as I said at the beginning, this whole webinar has been recorded, so we'll put it on our YouTube channel afterwards, so you can access it there. And then the report you can find on our website, so please go check it out, because there you can find more information about all the projects and solutions that we mentioned here today and more. So do have a look at that, and stay tuned for future webinars from Funka, because we have these quite regularly. So do keep an eye out for that. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for listening in.
Thank you very, very much, Emil. Thank you for organizing this and for inviting me. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Okay.
Okay. Take care, everyone.